All right, today we're going to unpack the story behind Strava. And listen, this isn't really a story about an app or technology. It's something much deeper. It's a story about the human need for connection, about dealing with unimaginable loss, and ultimately, about finding a way to rebuild. And it all really comes down to this one single powerful statement from its co-founder, Michael Horvath. Strava saved me. I mean, think about that. How does a company save its own creator? To really get that, we have to go way, way back to the beginning, before Strava was even a thing. So let's start right there. Part 1, a need for connection. Because the seed for Strava was actually planted long before the tech to build it even existed. You see, Michael Horvath's childhood was kind of defined by this feeling of being split in two. He was the youngest of 5, and his family was literally split between Sweden and the US. So he grew up with this constant, quiet feeling of not quite belonging anywhere, and this dream of somehow bringing everyone back together. And that experience planted 2 really powerful ideas in his head that would basically shape his entire life. 1, the absolute importance of deep human connection, and 2, this belief in our drive to reach our potential.
So that search for belonging followed him all the way to Harvard. But interestingly, he didn't find his place in the classroom, he found it in the rowing boathouse. And for the first time, he felt like he was part of a tribe. You know, a group of people from all different walks of life brought together by this intense, shared struggle towards one goal. And he was hooked. This was it. This was the feeling he'd been searching for his whole life. A community built by striving together.
So after graduation, this newfangled thing called the internet is just starting to bubble up. And he and his co-founder, Mark Gainey, are really missing that boathouse feeling. You know, the friendly competition, the shared struggle, just the camaraderie. And it sparked this huge question. Was it even possible to recreate that exact feeling online?
And this brings us right to part 2, an idea before its time. Because what they dreamed up was absolutely the right idea. It just turned out to be at the completely, totally wrong time. Now remember, this is 1995. They drew up a business plan for what they called a virtual locker room. Basically a place where you could log your workouts, see what your buddies were doing, and talk a little trash about it. If that sounds familiar, oh yeah, it was Strava, just more than a decade too early.
When they went to pitch it, the feedback they got from venture capitalists was, well, it was brutal. They were told flat out, it was a lousy idea. The core assumption that people would actually share personal info about their workouts online was seen as completely nuts. So, no money, no path forward. They had to put their dream on the shelf.
So they pivoted. They went and built a totally different, very successful company called Knaus Software. But Horvath describes that whole thing as the Silicon Valley Olympics, just this grueling 4-year sprint to either go public or get bought. It was a crazy ride, but at the end of the day, it wasn't really satisfying. Because all along, in the back of their minds, they were holding on to their real dream, to build a 100-year brand, something that would last and create real meaning and fun in people's lives. So a decade went by. They had to park the idea they were truly passionate about. But then, around the mid-2000s, something incredible happened. The world finally started to catch up with their vision. 2 huge things changed the game. First, the explosion of social networks like Facebook proved that all those experts from 1995 were dead wrong. People were absolutely willing to share their lives online, especially with people they trusted. And second, the technology problem just evaporated. GPS chips became standard in phones, which meant tracking your run or ride became totally seamless. All of a sudden, their lousy idea was looking pretty brilliant. And the difference was just mind-blowing. In the early days, when you had to use these clunky GPS devices and plug them into a computer, Strava was adding maybe 100 new people a week. But the day they launched their first mobile app, get this, they added 100,000 new athletes in one single day. The friction was gone, and it was clear the demand was there all along.
And they pretty quickly learned a massive lesson about what they had actually built. Yeah, they might have started out by focusing on hardcore athletes and leaderboards, but they discovered that's not what made people stick around. People would come for the cool features, for the data, but they stayed for the community. They stayed for the connection.
So, Strava was finally hitting its stride, growing like crazy. But just as the company was taking off, Horvath's personal life was about to face a challenge that would completely change everything.
In September of 2013, his wife, Anna, was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He found himself flying back and forth between his family in New Hampshire and the company in San Francisco, just trying to hold it all together. He knew something had to give. He made the decision to step down as CEO and move home full-time to be with her and their 4 children.
Now, over the next 3.5 years, he learned this incredibly profound lesson about what fulfillment really means. See, when you're facing a terminal illness, the goal can't just be to extend life. That's a goal you'll eventually lose. He realized that meaning has to be found in the present moment, in the now. What can this day bring? His wife, Anna, who is an artist, she was the perfect example of this. She worked in our studio almost to the very end, starting new pieces of art that she knew she would never, ever finish. The meaning wasn't in the final product. It was in the daily act of just doing it. He felt like he had prepared for how to care for her, but he was completely unprepared for what life would be like after she passed away in 2017. He describes it as being totally off script. His world was gone. And it wasn't about trying to rediscover the person he used to be because that guy didn't exist anymore. He had to start from absolute zero and define a whole new identity. And this is where it all comes back together. This brings us to our final chapter. Strava saved me. This is the moment where his deeply personal journey of rebuilding unexpectedly merged with the fate of the company he'd created all those years ago. So by 2019, 2 years after Anna's death, Horvath was still adrift, just trying to figure out this new life. And at the exact same time, Strava was in real trouble. The company wasn't making money, it couldn't raise more capital, they needed a big change, and in what he calls the least bad of all the bad options, he agreed to come back as CEO. His first day back involved the gut-wrenching task of laying people off, but on his second day, he stood up in front of everyone who was left and laid out a new, crystal-clear plan. They were going to focus almost 100% of their energy on one thing and one thing only, building the absolute best subscription service for their core community. It was a huge bet on their athletes, and then the pandemic hit, which created this massive, unexpected tailwind that just supercharged the business.
And this whole journey just brought everything full circle. Strava gave him a mission, a purpose, at a time when he was completely lost. And those lessons he learned from Anna about finding meaning in the day-to-day, that reshaped his entire philosophy. He now believes that true fulfillment, it isn't found in the big, epic moments of life. It's found in the small, intentional things we do day in and day out.
And really, that's the idea at the very heart of Strava's mission today. Helping people find their own sense of meaning through that daily, consistent effort. Which kind of leaves all of us with a pretty powerful question to think about. What small, intentional act is going to bring you fulfillment today?